Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for listening in or watching in on today's update from the Peoria County Health Department. A lot of interesting things happening in the community today. We have a lot of updates from Dr. Stoner. We also are going to have special guest Chief Judge Paul Gilfillan and Peoria County State's Attorney Jodi. And so I think probably just to keep things moving, and I know there's going to be a lot of questions for me in relations to some of this stuff, so we'll try to get the hard factual information out first, and then the speakers then will be available for questions. So at this time, pinch hitting for Monica Hendrickson is Dr. Stoner.
Thank you, Mayor Ardis. The statistics for today, the Tri-County total confirmed cases is 149. Peoria County.
149?
149.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Oh, okay. The Tri-County total confirmed cases, 149. Peoria County is at 95, Tazewell County at 41, and Woodford County at 13. There are no new deaths to report for the Tri-County region, although there were 2 deaths, both out of the Tri-County region, that will show up on the website. The collection at our collection sites, we did 35 at Carver today and 105 at our East Bluff office. Just a note about the collection sites. We're contacting, well, all patients will be contacted whether they're positive or negative. We had hoped to do this within 48 hours, but there are some lab delays considering the huge volume that they're seeing because they're doing things not just from us but from other areas in the state. And so it can take 3 to 4 days to get the results, so we ask that people be patient, but we do notify everyone as soon as we get the results. Also, there have been a number of questions about the type of test, and it is the PCR test looking for the virus as opposed to the antibody test. So a lot of people are wondering which test we've done, but they are all the PCR test looking for the virus. My pleasure to introduce Chief Judge Paul Gilfillan, the Illinois 10th Judicial Circuit Court. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stoner. The 10th Judicial Circuit consists of the 5 counties of Peoria, Tazewell, Marshall, Putnam, and Stark. My authority as Chief Judge over that circuit extends to the state court system and the 21 judges and courtrooms that operate within those counties. The public needs to know that court business continues to operate even in this emergency, albeit with a reduced staff and docket. In-person court appearances have been restricted since mid-March and continue to be so. That is, only by court order can an individual enter the courthouse. With that said, court business continues to be conducted. Since the mid-March emergency was declared, essential and emergency hearings have continued to be conducted. Some in person, some remotely, and those would include bond hearings, orders of protection, juvenile hearings, and the like. And when I say remote hearings, I mean virtual hearings that are conducted either over video conference or phone conference. And in the last few weeks and in the weeks to come, those types of hearings are ramping up, even for routine hearings, even for contested hearings, even for evidentiary hearings across all case types. That would include everything from traffic to divorce, to civil cases, to criminal cases. Judges and litigants are continuing to schedule those and cover as many as they can, albeit not a full docket. Litigants need to know that they need to stay in touch with their court cases, know when their next court date is, and they can do that by contacting either their attorneys, the circuit clerk's office, by phone or by internet, receiving mailings from the circuit clerk's office. To date, I know as of a few weeks ago, the circuit clerk sent out over 7,000 notices continuing various cases. Our goal now is not to continue every case, but to conduct as many as we can remotely. No jury trials have been conducted since mid-March, and none will be conducted through the month of May as long as the stay-at-home order is in effect, out of an abundance of caution and precaution for our potential jurors. I'd like to thank all of the court's justice partners for their cooperation and willingness to adapt during this uncertain time so that court business can continue to move forward. And those offices include the local sheriffs, state's attorneys, public defenders, bar associations, private attorneys, circuit clerks, court administrators, probation departments, and others. As a team, we will manage through this crisis together. I'll be available for questions after a bit. And now I'd like to introduce Peoria County State's Attorney Jodi Hoos.
Good afternoon. I wanted to add comments to what Chief Judge Gilfillan said today regarding how courts are adapting, as well as how the state's attorney's office is adapting to these circumstances. Court, as you know it, for those of you who watch Judge Judy, will not be the same. We are doing a number of cases remotely, as Chief Judge Gilfillan said, whether that's through a web-based platform or whether that's a good old-fashioned phone call. A number of cases are being disposed of daily, and those numbers will increase as we move forward. Two of the areas that I wanted to talk about today are our higher volume courtrooms, traffic and misdemeanor. For those of you that may have been in that courtroom in the past, on any given day, there could be up to 100 people in those courtrooms in a small, packed courtroom. Obviously, in today's society, that just can't occur. So we are adapting. Together with our circuit clerk, Bob Spears, and myself, we're looking to expand the number of cases that people can pay tickets online. We feel that if you can spend a few minutes on your computer and resolve your traffic matter is a lot better than coming to the courthouse and spending a few hours in our courtroom. So the days of somebody getting in a traffic accident and receiving a ticket and having a must-appear ticket where they then take off from work, come sit in a courtroom for an afternoon just to pay their ticket, hopefully will be gone. And now that individual, in the next few weeks and months, will be able to resolve that via online. We think that will greatly reduce the number of individuals that have to even come into the courthouse. With regards to the executive order, I want to remind people that the governor's executive order remains in effect. As Sheriff Asbell and Peoria Police Chief Lauren Marion have stated previously, we are reviewing those on a case-by-case basis. We are reviewing the totality of the circumstances, and we are asking for compliance. May 1st did not change that, and that will continue as long as the executive order remains in place. I will take any questions if anyone has them or has any for any of our other speakers today.
Jodi, first off, it's been about 6 weeks now since the stay-home order about that went into effect, 5, I don't know. Have you charged any of the many cases that have been brought forth to you for breaking this order? And if not, what?
So the question is, have we charged any of the cases? You refer to them as many. I'm not sure I'd refer to them as that. I think really for the most part, the public has done a great job of complying with this, and there have not been all that many cases that have actually been referred to us. But the question was whether we have charged any to this date. We have not charged any to this date. That doesn't mean that we won't going forward. I can't predict the future. I will say, though, there is a type of case that we have charged that 2 months ago probably wouldn't have been charged. But under the circumstances we find ourselves today, we charged this individual with a felony. And that was the individual a few weeks back who was going into some of the grocery stores, picking out who he felt was maybe a more vulnerable victim, and then going up and coughing on that individual and recording it as a joke for Facebook. I charged that person with 2 felony counts. As well as misdemeanor counts. Now, coughing on an individual in a grocery store 2 months ago probably was not that big of a deal, but today it is. So there are cases like that that going forward we evaluate and we look at, and depending on the circumstances, charges may get filed. There are charges or cases that come forward and we look at the circumstances and they won't get filed. But that is just one example of a case that is outside the normal realm of cases that last December probably wouldn't have caught my attention.
The state's
But it
attorney, you see some of your, cohorts in different counties. We have the Woodford County state's attorney, for example, saying flat out that he will not, prosecute any cases that have to do with breaking this executive order. Your response to that and what you, your view on this as the Peoria County state's attorney?
Sure, my view, and not just as Peoria County state's attorney, my view for any state's attorney is that our role is not to make the law. That's a legislative role. Our role is to enforce the law. I know as a citizen, I want my state's attorney to follow the law, whether that state's attorney likes the law or agrees with it. I want them to follow it. And that's what I do as the state's attorney. I will follow the executive order as it remains in place and will view any cases that come through my office with that lens of whether it was a violation of the executive order and what were the circumstances. So I think that our role is not to pick and choose what laws we follow, but follow the ones that are in place.
Jodi, one of the things that I want to know is if you listen to what the others were saying, there is no basis in the statute for enforcing the order. That's what Jeff Lauer said over in Tazewell, and Gregg Minger pretty much all but said that. Is there a criminal penalty that one could suffer if you do break the executive order? And if so, what would that be? Would it be a misdemeanor? Would it be a felony? Would it be, what charge would it be if you break that order?
Well, I think it depends on the circumstances, whether there's an obstructing justice, a disorderly conduct. In the example I said earlier, the felony aggravated battery. Under normal circumstances, coughing on someone would not be an aggravated battery. But under the circumstances we live in today as a society, that's an aggravated battery, and how he went about doing it.
But that is not breaking the order. I'm asking if someone goes out and opens up a store and lets folks in because they don't believe in the order, what could you possibly charge them with?
I think all of those are options, depending on the circumstances. Could file a petition in violation of the executive order. There are a number of charges that could be filed. Am I here to say I'm going to file charges in every case? No, obviously, as you pointed out, I haven't filed one yet. But it's not to say that as a society or as a state's attorney that we can simply decide one day that we don't want to follow this and we don't follow it. I don't think that's the case. I think we have to abide by that. I think my view of how they interpreted that or the arguments they're making are constitutional arguments. I don't agree with those. I think the statute is pretty clear on this. It did give the governor the power to do this, and if the legislature wants to limit that power, they certainly can, but that's a legislative issue. That's not a state's attorney issue.
So the Tri-County phase reopening plan that John Call implemented today, that letter was also signed by several Peoria County mayors. As Peoria County state's attorney, what action, if any, would your office take if some of those cities like Princeville or Chillicothe or Bartonville decide to follow East Peoria's lead and begin phase reopening independent of the governor's order?
Well, again, I'm not going to charge a mayor or somebody for sending a letter. Certainly anybody can send a letter to anyone they want. What I review is, first of all, it would be complaints that normally filter through a law enforcement agency, whether that's the sheriff's office or a local police agency, is a business that's doing something they shouldn't, not whether somebody penned their name to a letter and sent that to a governor.
In a situation situation, let's say a mayor here in Peoria County says, I'm going to allow a phased reopening of gyms, salons, all these other businesses that the East Peoria mayor allowed to reopen today under that same plan. So if there is a business that's reopened and it doesn't comply with the governor's order, but it complies with what the local mayor has told them is okay, what stance do you take on that? Do you let the local mayor's order stand or the governor's order? What takes precedence?
Well, I don't think the mayor would have that authority under the statute. I mean, it's the governor's power as written. So I don't see anyone other than the governor that has that authority, frankly.
Do you have any concerns with compliance as we move forward? I know people are already agitated that it's extended another 30 days. You haven't made any charges yet, but are you concerned about that going forward?
I am concerned about that. Nobody wants businesses closed. Nobody wants their lives or livelihood. A lot of these people are employed. And that's been completely changed. And I get that. And nobody wants that. But at the end of the day, I'm not a medical doctor. I don't have the knowledge and the expertise that those in the health department do. And certainly those individuals that are, advising the governor. So I understand that people are getting anxious, people are getting frustrated. I am too. But at the end of the day, we can't just resort to lawlessness. I mean, we have to follow what's being brought down. And if we don't, then why have any law, frankly? So I would encourage people, compliance, be smart, use common sense, follow the social distancing guidelines that are in place, and follow the executive order.
Just one more comment. So you mentioned how traffic court specifically has changed a lot under this order. I mean, if we get to a point where, COVID-19 is no longer such a concern, I mean, do we see some of these changes becoming permanent? Like, this is a more efficient way to do this, let's keep it?
Yes, and actually that was one of my goals prior to the coronavirus outbreak. One of my goals that I had in place was to get an online, sort of a deferred program, twofold. One where people that were charged with minor offenses could do a few things, submit that to us, and then not ever have to come to court. We would never charge the case. So, for example, an underage drinking ticket, where we'd have somebody, go do a couple alcohol classes, maybe do some public service hours, submit proof of that, and we won't even file the case. That's one area. The other area, the traffic tickets, the example I said on the front end, yes, that was another goal I had, to get a program in place where those individuals don't have to come to court. Because frankly, that happens to everybody. You get an offender bender, you have to take a half day off of work, go sit in a courtroom with 50 other strangers for 3 hours just to pay your traffic ticket. So I want to get that where they can do that online and not ever have to come to court. That's been brought to the forefront because of coronavirus, but that was something that I was looking to do later this year in any event.
As far as one of the things that, and Judge, you could also weigh in on this too, when this is over and we are starting back up, you could potentially have a lot of speedy trial issues, not from the time that we're having right now, but when we come back, people could all want their trial all at once, and there could be issues with that. What are the courts going to do, and what is your office going to do for the prompt judge, for the swift moving justice, if you will, because things have been not paused, but trials have been stopped. And how would you even do a jury trial now? Because people sit right next to each other. How do you do a jury trial?
I'll briefly answer the first part of that, and then I'll let Chief Judge Gilfillan respond to the second half. But I've instructed my assistants to stay on top of those cases that have speedy trial issues. Those are cases where somebody's in custody and has to be tried within a set time period. And we are very aware of those cases, very vigilant on when this is lifted. ranking them in priority, and we've been in communication with the chief judge too to let him know what cases may be a priority once we open up that do absolutely have to go, so we don't violate anybody's speedy trial rights.
To answer that question, this is a topic of discussion on a statewide level about speedy trial rights versus the risk to the public and even the defendants themselves to have that trial. We'll see where the landscape is 1 month from today. We know how fast things change as it is. I'm imagining that there might be some answer to that question as things start to relax, so to speak, allow more cases to proceed, whether that's June 1st or later. To be sure, we're not going to open up the floodgates on June 1st and have everybody in the courthouse as they were in February. There will be changes made, including probably more guidance as to how we're going to deal with the speedy trial issue. Your second question was, how do we conduct trials once we do get back up and running? We are also working on that. Depending on the guidance and restrictions that are in place at that time, whenever that may be, we've already assumed that there'll be a social distancing, 6-foot distance requirement in place, or if not, still good practice. We'll also assume that face masks or face coverings, if not required, probably would be a good practice for our jurors to have. And we have a few large courtrooms in the courthouse where we would spread out the jurors during jury selection and during the actual jury trial itself and during actual jury deliberation, so that they would never come into close contact with each other as they routinely would in a typical jury deliberation room. And we also plan, like a lot of other circuits in the state, not to open up full bore with 5 trials on the first week back, but maybe limit the trials to 1 or 2 so that we can use our bigger courtrooms for that purpose. And then priority will have to be weighed as to which of those trials go first. And I'm imagining at the top of that list will be the speedy trial cases.
As far as, you mentioned the deliberations and trying to spread out, but when you do a trial, when you do this stuff, everybody has to hear the same thing. Everybody has to see the same thing. How do you do? There's a lot of issues here that could make for a lot of appellate cases as well. If a juror's over here and not over here, then one might see things, one might not. I can't hear, I can't hear.
As with any trial, we always make it a priority to make sure, obviously, jurors can hear and see the proceedings. Now they'll be more spread out, as you suggest, maybe farther away from the witness. And as a result, we're just going to have to pay particular attention to make sure that every juror, even if now they're 20 feet away from the witness instead of 10, can still hear what's going on in the courtroom. If that's by sound amplification or moving jurors who request closer to the witness box and moving other jurors farther away that are comfortable with that, we'll adjust and adapt.
Would the public still get to sit in on it? Because some of these trials, as you know, and as Jodi knows, the families show up and they're packed. And the courtrooms are a public body. People are allowed to sit in and watch them. How is that going to happen?
To all the questions that were weaved within that statement, yes, yes, and yes. Public can come into the courtroom. They will be allowed into the courtroom. To the extent our social distancing means that courtroom fills up, we'll provide for an alternative source for them. We've done that before for large gatherings. Perhaps move members of the public to the jury commission room where there's a large TV and a large amount of space to spread out so that they can review proceedings being streamed live as they occur. So where there's a will, there's a way. In the unusual circumstance where there are too many members of the public, then our courthouse could possibly provide for, even on a remote basis. Case law exists where if that emergency is laid out on the record, appellate courts will entertain the reason for taking such action, for example, precluding a 100th member of the public from actually seeing a trial in the courthouse. I doubt that'll happen, but the judge is just going to have to be prepared for it.
Mayor Ardis, let me ask you a few questions. All right, so we know that the city of East Peoria began their reopening today.
I didn't hear Mayor Call's remarks today. I can answer if you want to throw me one.
Yeah, he was talking about how you had mentioned there was not much scientific methods behind their reasoning. If you could just kind of reply to that.
Okay. The question was my response to the letter that was sent about reopening and not having scientific metrics. The letter that I viewed beforehand and responded to the mayors was one of my concerns was that while it outlined a whole host of businesses that they proposed to opening on certain at certain time frames, there wasn't a level of understanding how it was going to be measured that it was everything that was happening safely, and my I guess my thought for those folks was, did you coordinate that with the public health officials that can help you formulate that?
Are you were worried, sir, about the potential loss of revenue? And I ask that because nobody wants to say that life is worth money or money's worth life. I'm not trying to equate that. But everybody right now in government is facing massive holes in their budgets. By opening up more, East Peoria and some of these other places might get more sales tax revenue, might get more motor fuel tax revenue, might get whatever, and that could ultimately, do you feel pressure to move forward faster than you might want to, given the fact that now the playing field is not level?
So the question was, are we worried about an economic loss, and will that have some type of a force us into some type of a movement earlier than we thought we would get into? Is that a fair?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're definitely afraid about losing revenues. I mean, we need all the revenues we can get. In terms of is that going to expedite anything? As I said earlier in the week, we have had a discussion. I think we will be bringing forward a plan this week that the governor will have an opportunity to look at. I did speak to the governor this week, and he indicated that he would be very anxious to have a look at that and consider it.
So does that mean that the city of Peoria could possibly start to reopen next week if the governor signs off on your plan?
I believe that there would be the potential for that. I don't know that it would be next week or the following week. I'm very hopeful that it would be sooner than the end of this month. And I think that, believe me, we're hearing loud and clear how much the private side, the business community, and the public side wants to get back to work. We get it. We're trying to comply with the governor's executive orders. A lot of people are making their own decisions on this, which we really don't have any ability to tell them they can't. So those are decisions that independent businesses are making. But we are going to bring forward something that I think is going to comply with the concerns that the governor has for opening the economy up in a safe way, not putting a lot more pressure on the health department and the medical communities, and getting this area back in business.
What were some differences, for example, that you would have in a plan that you would present?
Again, the majority of the plan that we're formulating is more driven around the fact that we're consciously acknowledging the need for safety. And just by saying, keep arm's distance, there's a little bit more detail than that when it comes to specific businesses. And I think that's why, I don't know this, but I think that's why the essential businesses were so narrowly defined at the very beginning, when we all know there's a lot of both private and public businesses that they comply with all the elements of social distancing all the time. They're never, we can use examples like furniture stores or, I don't want to get into all, there's a lot of conditions where there's just never a big crowd of people, and that they probably should have been able to maintain their business. So,
So
are
I
you
guess
looking
just
for
as a
more?
final comment, we've heard the comments from the state's attorney, we've heard the health department say to follow the executive order, state's attorney, follow the executive order, your message to the people.
Well, so the reality is that mayors, they do have certain powers in an emergency situation, that we can put emergency orders in place, and we have. Most of those have been decisions that we need to make regarding the city budget and city moves and purchases and so on. I don't know, and I've asked our legal, and we haven't seen anything that would allow emergency powers of a mayor to override executive orders of a governor. And I think that's probably where we're looking at that from, is really we don't see that a mayor has the ability to say we're going to disregard an executive order. Okay, thank you very much. Look forward to seeing everyone on Monday.